I don't think I have made a video before about a tax case, a tax appeals case, but I think this case you'll find interesting because it involved a man receiving an inheritance of a house from his aunt, and he has lost an appeal now with the Revenue Commissioners over a €317,312 inheritance tax bill. Interestingly, this case involves the man claiming that he was entitled to exemption for a dwelling house relief on the basis that he was a dependent relative. So he was claiming he was a dependent relative of his aunt, and he was entitled to the relief. And the relief in relation to being exempt from capital acquisitions tax, there's a certain number of conditions that you must fulfill. One was that the house was the only or main home of the disponer, that is the man's aunt, at the date of their death. Also that you lived in the house as your only or main home for the 3 years immediately before the date of the inheritance. You do not own or have an interest in any other house, and also that you were a dependent relative. Now, just to go back to the case, the man has lost his appeal. He claimed that he was permanently incapacitated due to mental health reasons. He said he was a dependent relative of his aunt due to mental health issues. However, Revenue Commissioners discovered that he was listed as a managing director on LinkedIn around about the same time. Senior businessman, quote, struggling to survive emotionally, has lost his appeal against a €317,312 bill for capital acquisitions tax stemming from his inheritance of a house from his aunt. And this report is from the Irish Times, Gordon Deegan. The man's aunt died in 2017. He inherited a home from her. Following an investigation, the Revenue Commissioners last year issued a bill to the man alleging underpayment of €288,465 in capital acquisitions tax, along with a 10% surcharge for late filing, that is €28,846. So the total Revenue Commissioners were looking for was €317,312. The Revenue issued its assessment on the basis that the house the man received was not his aunt's main residence, and that is one of the conditions for the dwelling house relief, and also that he received free accommodation and gifts from the woman. He disputed the assessment and he claimed the exemption from inheritance tax because he claimed that he was a dependent relative of his aunt and that he is permanently incapacitated due to ongoing mental health issues. A submission to the Tax Appeal Commission, and it's the Tax Appeal Commission that deals with appeals of Revenue Commissioner assessments, stated that the former managing director is at the end of his working life and unable to support himself. It further said he was, quote, very vulnerable and emotionally struggling to survive, which his medical reports have clearly stated. And that's interesting because we'll go back to the medical report in a minute. In her findings, however, the Appeals Commissioner, Claire O'Driscoll, found that at the time of the man's or of the aunt's death in 2017 or before it, the man was not permanently and totally incapacitated due to mental or physical infirmity from maintaining himself, grounds that would have excused him from inheritance tax and would have given him an exemption. The Tax Appeals Commissioner said that the medical documentation submitted did not establish that the appellant was at any time permanently and totally incapacitated. She also pointed to the man's LinkedIn profile from August 2022, which stated that the man was at the time managing director of a business and had been since July 1988. A letter, and this is interesting, a letter dated April 24 saying the man, quote, has suffered from an extremely disabling condition for the past 25 years or so, was submitted on his behalf by a doctor. The appellant is doing everything in his power to combat the exceptional level of anxiety that he's experiencing. It would not surprise me if the High Court designated him as a vulnerable adult and made him a ward of court to protect his welfare, he said. However, the doctor did not appear as a witness to be cross-examined. The Tax Appeals Commissioner accepted that the appellant has experienced poor mental health since at least 2008, but none of the documentation states that the appellant was at any time permanently and totally incapacitated, and that is one of the conditions that he would have needed to prove or fulfill in order to get this exemption. She found that the man was not a dependent relative and therefore not entitled to an exemption from capital acquisitions tax on that ground. She also said that the man was not entitled to an exemption to CAT as the home was not his aunt's main residence. So that is one of the other conditions that need to be fulfilled in order to get the the qualifying condition for the dependent relative dwelling house relief. One of the conditions is that it would have been the aunt's main residence, and in fact it wasn't. So that's an interesting case. Tax Appeals Commissioner, €317,312 inheritance tax bill. Obviously it's a lot of money, but clearly the house is probably going to be worth more than that, and he might have to sell it. It's a matter for himself. Obviously he has lost this appeal anyway against the Revenue Commissioners, and it just goes to show you that you can make submissions and returns to the Revenue Commissioners and claim certain exemptions and so on and so forth, but you must fulfill the conditions. Hope you find the video useful. If you do, I'd appreciate if you hit the thumbs up button down below. Thank you very much.